Obviously, we are here to talk about Don't Log Off. I guess the first question, the obvious one is, how did this idea come together?
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We really appreciate it. So, as far as how this idea came to be, it really was a bit of an organic snowball during COVID. We were on another project prior to COVID, and much like many of our friends and across the industry, that project was put on pause and has still been put on pause. And so we were at home, so starved for any sort of creative expression. And just by talking with a group of friends of ours, don't Log Off slowly got put together and then very quickly got put together because it became the kind of thing where we had this opportunity, this window of time where everyone was stuck at home and either the movie was going to happen then or it wasn't going to happen. And that's sort of the logistical kernel. But Garrett, do you want to fill in a bit?
Yeah, I think what we also really found compelling is there is this sort of shared experience that all of us went through. I think people are either keen or not to revisit, but it is something that art hasn't necessarily grappled with in a compelling way. And I think Brandon and I really felt like our friends were the ones who helped us through that time as well. And also we love a who done it, we love a how done it. And so I think we really wanted to acknowledge this shared experience, this sort of shared trauma, this period of time, this once in a generation event. And so I think we wanted to at very least acknowledge this thing that we all went through and make art during beginning during that time.
And I think there's the impression to those who aren't particularly film savvy that, a film set over Zoom must be really easy to make. You get your people online and you press record. The reality of that I'm getting is a lot more involved. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Certainly, yeah, quite the opposite. I think it is. I think on a base level, we had as opposed to a typical film, which I guess goes, two cameras at once, but primarily just a camera and your performers. I think we had up to six cameras going at once. All of the actors that we were fortunate enough to work with on this project, we had them all shooting remotely from various locations. And so they were forced to, although they very graciously did, they wore several hats, camera ops, sound, they were their own, they operated their own boards as well as far as us going for take after take after take. And so we really were working on, crafting a project starting with up to six performances at once. And then our Eric, our wonderful, wonderful editor, had to cut together six performances at once over the course of the entire film because every single person is visible the whole time. We thought about it a lot like live theater. Brandon and I both have theater backgrounds. Of course, when you're doing scene work, it's not as if we can punch in on brand downstage center, although I guess the spotlight exists, but you really are working on the entire stage picture the entire time. And that is ultimately how we approached this project, which of course, if you're punching in on someone's close up in more traditional filmmaking or you're shooting coverage, there are slightly fewer spinning plates at once. Brandon, you want to talk about post too?
Yeah, post was an entirely different process than a traditional live action film because it's much more akin to animation when you're making a screen life film, in that you are having to animate the entire computer screen around all of those up to six cameras at once. And so the process was many steps in that. Like animation, you start with a wireframe. We started with a first cut of our film where it was all built out of screen recordings. So Garrett, myself, and Eric, our editor, we would take screen recordings of our own computers, texting each other, and then we would use those as our like first round of footage, basically. And so when we're punching in on something, it's incredibly pixelated. It does not look great. Sometimes the text is all wrong, but it's just for us to get that first sense of what the film looks like. And that adage that a film is rewritten three times is and was so true here, in that when we were in post, we had a whole other revision on the film that our producers and our entire post-production team were so instrumental in creating and putting together. We were able to really hopefully hone the story and elevate it as much as we possibly could in post.
And what is that experience like directing, remotely? Obviously, you weren't there with the actors, I mean, obviously sometimes, internet signal dipped, how was that experience?
Yeah, it was definitely different and not something that we were used to. And I suppose now you just look at how the world is changing and now people audition and do callbacks over Zoom, but that wasn't quite the case when we were shooting. And so it was a lot of trial and error. The other thing that was very interesting about shooting over Zoom is the frame wasn't exactly the same as the camera because we're shooting on GoPros that we're placing right next to the camera. So what we're watching is not 100% the same. And so we're having to ask them to send us some of the shots afterwards so that we can test them and make sure we really got the shots because we're not physically there. And then as far as working with the actors creatively, yeah, that was a whole other process. Like when the energy was dipping and we're trying to give notes and whatnot, we would try to get creative where like if it's the middle of the night and the energy is dipping, I mean, Garrett started to come up with fun things like everyone let's do a dance or everyone go run and touch your doorknob just to sort of infuse some like energy into the work.
It was, yeah, I think the thing that surprised us most was during, especially during that time, I think post COVID, we all like became way more digitally savvy. We became more Zoom savvy. We became more remote XYZ interacting, meeting. We became significantly more technologically savvy in this very specific capacity. And so I think with the exception of obviously technical difficulties, we did have to get creative, but for the most part, everyone was a team player, and we were able to navigate it without too many hiccups.
And I think in recent years, the screen life format has kind of risen up and is now rivaling found footage. What do you think it is about this method of storytelling that audiences find so fascinating?
I think inherently or otherwise, we are addicted to our devices, and we live, a significantly increasing proportion of our day-to-day lives on device. We feel, I think I've used this metaphor before, but the anxiety that we feel when we send a particularly vulnerable text or we're waiting on information back and we see those three dots pop up right before that message comes through, that is real anxiety. That is real feeling with text on a screen, not a physical person in front of us. And I think ultimately, as we as people become more technologically dependent and more of our lives live that way, I think we're more attuned to how that feels cinematically. I think people, especially in our industry, bemoan what is it, two screens or second screening, where you're watching your show and you have your phone up and you're sort of toggling back and forth. I think we're interested in including an aspect of that in our filmmaking. If it's what people are doing anyway, if the three of us are on a Zoom right now and Brandon and I are talking about you behind your back, wouldn't you want to know that? If we're like, wow, this interview is amazing. We find that very compelling. Or if you're texting your cat on the side, we want to know what your kitten has to say about that. So I think ultimately, as our lives, we are interested in cinema. I think mirroring our lives.
Anything to add?
I think you sum it up so well, Garrett. I think truly the only thing that I would add to it is that we're looking for whenever we're approaching a story, we're always looking for how the medium or how the framing device is going to serve that story. Really not the other way around. And so the reason why we approached this film from the screen life subgenre is truly that it was the format that fit this story best, in that we were stuck at home and it felt like the most honest way to portray this story.
I guess my final question to you both, why do you hope that audiences take a chance on this? Like you said, we're kind of through the pandemic and this, lockdown Zoom era, and so I guess, some people might find the film triggering, but others might find it weirdly nostalgic. Why do you hope that people take a chance on this film?
We love those complicated feelings, and quite honestly, we never intended this film to come out during COVID because certainly COVID was a time that was real and that was hard for all of us in so many different ways, and we wanted to give our audiences some distance when we were going to release the film and to have all those complicated feelings of nostalgia that you're referring to, and it's become very quickly a period piece, and so we're hoping that audiences take away truly, hopefully, going back to this period of time and remembering what their lives were like and what got them through. Because as we started this conversation by saying what got us through were our friends, and they kept us smiling and having fun and not too bored the entire time. And that's why we made this film. It's a love letter to all of them, and so we hope that audiences enjoy the ride. And the other piece is that hopefully audiences like indie filmmaking, and our film is as indie as they get. Truly, it came together from a very small team of people. Many of them are friends of ours, people who we've been working with for a while now, and who we love very dearly. And so anyone who's a fan of indie film, and I suppose, doing the impossible and having a miracle film go out into the world, we just would so appreciate any and all support. We love the indie film community.
I think also like our film is not explicitly while it is set during that time, it's not about COVID. It's not about a team of virologists trying to save the world. I think that ultimately is and was an incredibly important job. Ours was a group of lay people stuck at home. Unfortunately, during that period of time, of course, many people had COVID, people had suffered serious like health issues, people died. Like we are not interested in trivializing any of that. I think the experience of a lot of lay people trying to do their best and staying at home was one of significant remove. We are interested in talking about a group of people removed. We are not interested. This film is not explicitly about COVID. I think that's important. And I think we also feel pretty strongly that the two of us, over the course of a long post production process, when utilizing Screen Life, we were interested in doing things from a Screen Life perspective, from a VFX perspective that we hadn't seen on film before. There are a couple of effects in the film that we just haven't ever seen before. And so if people are interested in how we are slowly, slowly pushing the ball forward from a Screen Life perspective, trying to break those rules a little bit, a little innovative, a little creative, and a fun ride, I think this movie is ultimately for them. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and best of luck with the release.
Thanks so much, Kat.
Thanks, Scott.